High in the Colorado Rockies, where snow buried the pine forests and wind howled like wolves through the canyons, a single cabin stood against the blizzard. Inside, behind the thick timber walls and locked doors, lived a woman who had once commanded entire battalions, Colonel Jessica Stonewalker. At 55, Jessica moved like a soldier, but carried herself like a ghost. Her once sharp blue eyes now held the dull, hollow stare of someone who had seen too much and lost even more. 8 years ago, she'd been one of the Army's rising legends, innovative, respected, unstoppable. Soldiers followed her without hesitation, their loyalty unbreakable. Her call sign Stone wasn't for her heart, but for her strength, unyielding, solid, reliable. But legends she knew too well could shatter. The memory haunted every corner of the cabin. 12 soldiers lost under her command, including her daughter, Lieutenant Emma Walker. Jessica had led the mission herself against her better judgment, against every mother's instinct, but she had trusted the plan, and the plan failed. When the helicopters returned empty, when the after-action report blamed intelligence failures, the Army cleared her of formal wrongdoing. But no tribunal could clear the guilt that settled in her chest like lead. She resigned quietly, moved deeper into the mountains than most dared. No phone, no internet, no contact. She turned the cabin into her fortress. But no walls kept out the ghosts. Each morning she awoke before dawn, her body still trained to expect the next mission. Each night she drifted to sleep beneath a tarnished, distinguished service medal and a box of ribbons she never displayed. She told herself she was content in exile, that the world had no use for a leader who failed. But deep down, Jessica feared something worse, that she could never trust herself to lead again. And so the woman once known as Stone chose silence over redemption. She hunted elk, chopped wood, and listened only to the wind. Human voices were distant memories. Until tonight. Because far below where the mountain trail vanished beneath drifts of snow, 10 figures were climbing toward her cabin. 10 soldiers, desperate, hunted, and about to shatter the silence Jessica Walker had built her life upon. The pounding on the cabin door shattered the storm's rhythm. Jessica Walker froze in place. For a long moment, she stood perfectly still, listening, not breathing. It came again. Not the howl of wind or crack of frozen branches. A human sound, fists gloved and desperate hammering against her door. Her hand instinctively dropped to the sidearm holstered on her hip. She crossed the cabin floor in silence, every step rehearsed. At the door, she peered through the frost-crusted window. What she saw made her heart seize. Soldiers, 10 of them, female, hunched against the blizzard, their uniforms' torn faces half hidden behind layers of snow-crusted gear. Some held weapons, others supported the wounded. Their faces weren't just cold, they were hunted. Jessica's breath caught. U.S. Army personnel requesting shelter. A voice called over the wind, clear, firm, exhausted. We have wounded. Please, ma'am, we're being pursued. Her hand gripped the door frame so tightly her knuckles whitened. Every instinct screamed to act. Yet fear deeper than any she'd faced in combat rooted her to the floor. Not again. Not after Emma. 8 years she'd lived with the weight of 12 lives. Every lost soldier counted against her. And now fate stood on her doorstep demanding to know whether she would risk adding 10 more to that list. She forced herself to speak, and though her throat felt raw. Who's in command? Captain Maria Alvarez, ma'am. The voice trembled, not from fear but from exposure. Ada, 2nd Airborne Classified Mission compromised. Please, ma'am, we don't have time. The storm shrieked through the trays as if to emphasize the urgency. Jessica hesitated a second longer, then she threw open the door. The wind slammed into the cabin, a wall of freezing air that sent embers scattering from the hearth. Snow swirled past her like smoke. Captain Alvarez, eyes red with exhaustion, stumbled forward, carrying a young private half-conscious from blood loss. Behind her, the other soldiers followed in a broken line, one after another, each looking far past their physical limits. Jessica stepped aside, letting them pour into her solitude. For the first time in years, her cabin was full of life. She bolted the door and turned. Her eyes swept the group with cold efficiency, cataloging injuries and morale faster than she could admit. 2 gunshot wounds, at least 1 concussion. Frostbite on 3, ammunition depleted, spirits cracking. Her tactical brain, buried for years, roared back to life. Clear your weapons, she ordered without thinking. Drop packs by the stove. Medics, identify yourselves. The soldiers obeyed instantly, a relief etched on their faces. Someone had taken command. I'm Captain Alvarez, the young woman said, stepping forward again. Her face beneath the soot and ice bore the hardened look of someone who had learned to lead too quickly. We're being hunted, Colonel. I don't know by who, but they're good. Better than us. Jessica said nothing, processing. Communications down. Navigation scrambled. 3 of my squad didn't make it to the mountain. They killed them in minutes. Jessica's hands worked automatically, checking each soldier's injuries as Alvarez continued. But inside her mind, fear tightened like a vice. It was happening again. A team on the run. Hunted. A mission gone wrong. The last time she'd seen faces like these, they'd belonged to her daughter's unit, and they hadn't survived. How did you find this cabin? Jessica asked quietly, wrapping a pressure bandage around a gunshot wound. Intel, Alvarez rasped. Said there was an ex-colonel living up here. Someone who'd understand. The unspoken words stung. Someone who'd understand failure. Jessica stood slowly, realizing every soldier in the room now looked to her, not as a recluse, not as a ghost, but as the leader legend still whispered about. It terrified her more than the storm outside. You need a medic, not me, Jessica said at last, stepping back. But we found you, Alvarez replied, her voice steady despite the fatigue. And we're not leaving. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Jessica turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the storm raged, but something colder prowled its edges. Shadows moved in the snow. Predators waiting. She could send them away. Lock the door. Pretend she'd never heard their call. But when Alvarez spoke again, it wasn't as a subordinate. It was as a daughter to a mother figure she barely knew. Ma'am, we're trusting you. Jessica closed her eyes, the weight crushing. The ghost screamed at her to refuse. She opened her eyes. Then gear up, she whispered, turning back to face them all. Because they're not here to take prisoners. In that moment, the soldier known as Stone came back to life, and the cabin, once her tomb, became a fortress. The first shot shattered the cabin window. Jessica Walker dropped instantly, instincts faster than thought. Splinters of glass rained across the floorboards. The storm had hidden them, but now the enemy was here. Position, she barked, voice snapping across the room, with a command authority she hadn't felt in 8 years. The soldiers moved without hesitation. Alvarez dragged 2 wounded behind the stone hearth. The others scrambled for what cover the small cabin offered. Jessica peered through the broken window eyes, scanning the tree line. Muzzle flashes flickered between the snow-drenched pines, disciplined, precise. Not amateurs, not random hunters, professional. They weren't here to capture. They were here to kill. She counted 6 signatures, maybe more, moving in coordinated arcs. Cut off the cabin, starve out the prey. Her worst nightmare was now her reality. Jessica backed from the window, mind racing. Memory slammed into her, the compound in Iraq, the failed extraction, her daughter's final scream. Every sound in this siege echoed those ghosts. She could feel her breathing spiral, the onset of paralysis creeping into her limbs. Not again. Colonel Alvarez's voice broke through, firm but pleading. What's the move? Jessica looked at her. The young woman's face was bloodied, terrified, but her eyes burned with trust. And in that moment, Jessica saw not a subordinate, not even a soldier. She saw her daughter. The weight broke her and rebuilt her all at once. Jessica stood, suppressing fire. Martinez covered that north window. Rodriguez established fallback positions to the basement. Alvarez with me. Your command second. The orders flowed from her like breathing. The soldiers responded instantly. The enemy's next volley struck the cabin's reinforced walls. Ricochets sang past Jessica's ears as she sprinted to the supply locker. 8 years of solitude hadn't dulled her preparation. From behind canned rations and dusty tarps, she pulled the emergency case she'd packed long ago for a day she prayed would never come. Claymore mines, Captain Alvarez, Jessica said calmly, handing her the devices. You're going to help me lay a trap. Outside, the attackers pressed forward under the cover of the blizzard. But Jessica's mind was clear now. She saw the terrain not as a frozen death trap, but as a tactical grid. The storm was no longer the enemy. It was her weapon. She sent 2 soldiers crawling through a rear hatch to rig tripwires across the narrow mountain trail. The mines would buy them time. She knew time was their only currency. A rocket-propelled grenade slammed into the cabin wall, rocking the structure. Smoke filled the interior. Jessica choked, wiping soot from her eyes. "Colonel, they're breaching." Her mind calculated the odds. The cabin would fall. That was inevitable. But that wasn't the fight, not this time. Jessica turned to Alvarez. "Get everyone prepped to move. 5 minutes. That's all I can buy you." And then Alvarez asked. Jessica looked at the mountain beyond the cabin walls. "Then we go up, in this storm. They'll expect a retreat down a hill." "Exactly." Alvarez hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded. Jessica turned, her voice sharp. "Listen up. We're abandoning this cabin. Moving light. Wounded take priority. Stay tight. Stay low. The mountain is our exit. But we'll never make it." Private Santos whispered, pale from blood loss. Jessica knelt beside her, gripping the young woman's shoulder. "We will, because I'm not losing anyone else." She meant it, with every scar on her soul. Outside, the first claymore detonated, sending a shockwave through the storm. Screams echoed from the tree line. The enemy was close now. Jessica checked her sidearm. "Last magazine. We move now." With Alvarez guiding the front and Jessica covering the rear, they slipped from the burning cabin into the blizzard's grasp. Snow swallowed their figures instantly. Behind them, the cabin that had once been Jessica's sanctuary crumbled under gunfire and flames. Jessica forced herself to look forward. She chose this path. The ascent was brutal. Visibility dropped to inches. Wind battered them sideways. She led them along a narrow deer trail she alone knew, hugging the cliffs where sensors couldn't track heat signatures. The mountain punished every step. Santos collapsed twice. Each time, Jessica was the one who lifted her. Halfway up the ridge, Alvarez faltered. Jessica steadied her. "Trust me, I do." By dawn, after what felt like a lifetime spent in the storm, Jessica saw it, the extraction ridge. A flat plateau where the signal beacon could transmit. She deployed it, her frozen fingers barely working. The beacon's green light pierced the fog. Behind them, distant gunfire echoed, but too late. They had climbed higher than pursuit could follow. When the Black Hawk finally roared over the ridge, Jessica Walker stood at its center, supporting 2 wounded soldiers. Her hair was ice, her knuckles were bleeding, but her eyes burned. Every soldier made it aboard, every single one. As the helicopter lifted into the pale morning sky, Jessica glanced down at the mountain and the ruins of her past. This time she had saved them, and her ghost for once stayed silent. The roar of the Black Hawk faded into memory as Jessica Walker stood once more on solid ground, not at her isolated cabin, but at Fort Carson's medical wing, where soldiers recovered and intelligence officers waited. Her mission wasn't over. In fact, it had only begun. Captain Alvarez stood beside her, face still pale, but eyes resolute. "Ma'am, the intel you found in the mountains. It's real." Command confirmed. "Someone sold us out." Jessica didn't need confirmation. She knew. Buried within the equipment seized from the enemy ambushers she had discovered, what she feared most: encrypted satellite uplinks, advanced comms gear, and most damning internal military frequency charts marked with access codes used by U.S. command networks. Betrayal. Jessica stood silent as Alvarez's words echoed. 8 years ago, during Operation Cold Viper, she'd lost 12 soldiers, including her own daughter, to what was deemed a tactical error. But the moment she saw those frequency charts, everything shifted. Her daughter hadn't died because of bad leadership. She died because someone inside had sent them into a trap. Jessica demanded answers. 2 days later, sitting in the Pentagon's secured briefing room, she got them. General Carter himself laid it bare: a compromised intelligence network operating for over a decade, embedded within civilian contractors supplying tech and logistics to Special Forces units. They'd redirected missions, suppressed reports, sold classified mission data to foreign operatives. The same network that targeted Alvarez's team had orchestrated Cold Viper. Her daughter's death had been no accident. The revelation hit harder than enemy gunfire. "You're the reason we discovered them," Colonel Carter said quietly. "Without you, they would have stayed hidden." Jessica's response was cold steel. "I want names." The arrest came swiftly. Over 40 civilian contractors and 3 high-level defense officials were indicted. Sensitive operations across 3 continents were suspended pending security overhauls. Justice in its slow grinding way had begun. And yet Jessica felt no victory. At the hospital, she sat beside Private Santos as the young woman recovered. Alvarez entered quietly. "They're offering you reinstatement," Alvarez said, her voice careful. "Full rank. General. You'd have your own command." Jessica looked at her, then at the IV tubes in Santos's arm. "Frontline command's not what I need anymore." Why Jessica stood glancing out the window at the mountains far beyond Washington's concrete walls. Because I finally learned what leadership really costs and what it truly means. It wasn't medals or promotions. It wasn't flawless tactics or battlefield victories. It was standing when your soldiers couldn't. It was choosing to care, knowing it might destroy you. And it was teaching others to do the same. Her decision stunned the Joint Chiefs. Jessica Walker declined promotion and frontline command. Instead, she requested something simpler: the return of her mountain property, federal clearance to operate there, and resources to build something new. A leadership academy. The government approved. 3 months later, as snow melted from the Colorado peaks, bulldozers carved foundations into the ridge where her cabin once stood. But this wasn't a fortress built to keep the world out. It was a sanctuary built to teach others how to lead it. The Walker Leadership Institute opened within the year. Its focus wasn't tactics or weapons drills. Jessica taught lessons harder to quantify: mental resilience, command under emotional strain, and the balance between operational precision and human compassion. She taught commanders how to lead without losing themselves or their soldiers. Veterans came from across branches. Commanders with scars not visible in after-action reports. Leaders doubting their worth, haunted by guilt, afraid of failing again. Jessica stood before them in plain fatigues, her expression as steady as the mountain winds behind her. "Out there," she said softly, "you'll face enemies you can't predict. Missions that fail. People who die. Not because you're weak, not because you're careless, but because war costs everything." She paused. "And still you lead." Captain Maria Alvarez, now her second in command, watched silently from the rear. She remembered that voice, the one that had pulled her from the blizzard. Jessica's lessons weren't abstract. They were survival. Her reputation grew beyond the Army. Marines, Air Force, even civilian crisis coordinators came to the Institute. Private Santos returned too, not as a trainee, but as proof of success. Jessica didn't speak of the ambush. She didn't recount Cold Viper. She didn't need to. Her presence told the story. Her rebuilt cabin bore a simple inscription above the entryway: "No one left behind, because we choose to care." Months passed, then years. And Jessica Walker found peace not in isolation, but in service. She no longer carried ghosts. She carried responsibility and the quiet knowledge that she was shaping leaders who would lift others long after she was gone. In the end, Jessica understood saving her daughter had never been possible, but saving everyone else that she could still do. And she did, every single day. Jessica Walker's name, once buried beneath scandal and silence, became a symbol not of perfection, but of perseverance. From her mountain sanctuary, her leadership philosophy spread far beyond military circles. Her teachings reshaped command schools nationwide, not focused on tactics alone, but on resilience, emotional strength, and compassion under fire. The term Walker Method became standard at officer training programs, a leadership style that balanced strategic brilliance with human vulnerability. The 10 soldiers she'd saved carried her lessons with them. Captain Alvarez, now a respected major, taught Jessica's approach to her own command. Private Santos, once near death in the blizzard, recovered and pursued military medicine, helping others survive as Jessica had helped her. Across units, across generations, Jessica's legacy grew not from her medals or rank, but from the quiet strength she showed in choosing to lead again after failure. Her once forgotten mountain cabin transformed into a renowned institute where leaders came to understand a hard truth. Real strength isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about rising after them. Jessica's life proved that leadership isn't built in moments of victory, it's forged in the aftermath of loss. She never sought recognition, but in time her story inspired thousands. And perhaps that's the lesson you too can carry. We all fail, we all break, but true courage isn't found in never falling, it's found in standing back up and lifting others when we do. If Jessica's journey moved you to honor someone in your life who showed you strength when you felt weak, leave a comment below, share this message, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that remind us heroes aren't perfect. They're human, and sometimes that's what makes them strongest of all.